Hello and welcome to the Business of Authority. I'm Jonathan Stark.
And I'm Rochelle Moulton.
And today we talk about what to do when the rules change.
Ooh, and they change a lot.
Yes, they do. I feel like this subject has come up a little bit recently, but especially with like Silicon Valley Bank and startup land and the things that are going on there, the rules changing over there. But this is inspired by a conversation I had yesterday talking about a specific angle on this, which is when something, I think of this like the way sometimes we talk about like when you're an employee and then you go solo and like you can maintain this technician mindset. And we've talked about this concept before, but I love the rules angle where like when I was an employee, I was very much a technician mindset in the E-Myth definition and didn't see any value in like the entrepreneur or the manager other roles, the two other roles in the business. They were just like leeching off of my genius efforts.
Of course they were.
Right. It never occurred to me to wonder how the work showed up every day without fail on my desk. But hey, that happens easily, right?
Sure.
So I'll use myself as an example, but I've seen this a lot recently where stuff that used to be working isn't working anymore. And when I was like, when I jumped from corporate, it was like, there was this set of rules. Had I gone straight solo, I went to an agency, but if I had gone solo, I would have been playing my game that I played at work at Staples. I'd just be like working on my craft. I'd be like playing that game. If you think about it like a game that has rules and it's like, okay, all of the best practices of developing a FileMaker database for work groups and like all of that stuff. It was like a game that I was playing. And then had I gone solo, I would be still thinking the way to succeed or to win would be to play those rules even harder, like play that game even better.
To be really good at your craft.
Just be really good at my craft. Like as long as I'm cranking out great stuff fast that solves problems for people, they would never want to go back to the old way, that kind of thing, like creating big customer satisfaction in the user base, which I absolutely loved. I loved winning that game. I loved it. But then had I gone straight solo, I would have been lucky if that continued to work, because starting a business is different than being a good FileMaker developer. Obvious. Well, when you say it out loud, it's obvious, but it's a different game. And the rules, like, yes, if I was going solo as a FileMaker developer, yes, I would still need to be good at that game, but I'm playing a much bigger game as a business owner that has way more moving parts, and it still has rules, but they're just different rules. It's kind of like you're playing checkers. That's the FileMaker stuff. And then now you're playing checkers on a backgammon board. And you're like, how come I'm losing? Like, why am I losing? And it's like, well, because, you're following the wrong rules. Like another example is, I hate to use sports metaphors because I'm not really a sports guy, but my brother told me this one once and I love it. Like there's some basketball players in the NBA that are sort of despised because they talk smack and they foul people all the time and they're just jerks basically, right? So they're kind of like the villains. And there's sort of two games going on in terms of rules. So like there's the rules, there's the one philosophy is if you don't use your 4 fouls, because in basketball you can foul people 4 times before you get kicked out of the game. I think I remember that correctly.
I thought it was 5, but
it could be. I don't know, but I think
it's been a while.
you can foul out of the game. Maybe the 5th foul and you get kicked out. So a certain kind of player is going to use every single one of those fouls very strategically. And as a kid, when I did used to watch basketball, it would be like, oh, that guy's too aggressive. It's unsportsmanlike. What a jerk. Because that's a different game. The sportsmanship game is a different set of rules. And I like the basketball analogy because they're overlaid and they intersect. So it's almost like you would choose to break the good sportsmanship rules to be better at the basketball rules and use everything at your disposal, even though a foul, because to a kid, I'm like, a foul is a punishment. It's like detention, like you did something wrong. But for a basketball player who uses all their fouls, they're like, no, it's just another tool. It's like part of the rules. Right. I can do that if I want. Why wouldn't I? And the reason you wouldn't is because of a different layer of rules, like sportsmanship or values or something
values.
like that.
Yeah, I like that. I like thinking of it as the value, because one person, the big value might be sportsmanship, and somebody else is, no, I want to win.
Right. And so if you're young me watching a Celtics game, with, I don't know, Kevin McHale knocking someone off the court, and I'm thinking he's a bad player. I don't know if McHale was like that, but he's the only one I can remember. Or Bird, I guess. And that guy's a bad basketball. He's a bad example. He's a bad person or something like that. And I can imagine him saying back to me like, dude, you're watching the wrong game. Like I'm following different rules here. I'm operating by a different set of rules. And anyway, to bring this back to us, it's like whether you decided to switch to a new game consciously, subconsciously, or the game was changed by somebody else, where you were playing checkers and now you're playing backgammon, you're not going to get any satisfaction by playing checkers better. That's the whole point. It's like the game is different, the rules are different, and if you want to succeed at the new game, you really have no choice but to operate by the new rules or leave the game.
Right. Or you can also choose to play backgammon. Like you could look and say, you know what? I've been playing checkers and I want to learn how to play backgammon. So you can do it that way. Yeah. But but it's all about understanding that it is a new game, that the rules have changed.
Yes. Right. And so the really frustrating, angering situation is when you didn't decide to play a new game and the rules change out from underneath you. We're actually both lamenting the, software that we used to record this, like made a change at the beginning, for no obvious reason. And it's like, why did you change that? It's so frustrating when something that you've kind of been counting on, or at least used to, just changes out from underneath you. It's not your fault.
Yeah, it just changes.
Yeah, but it's the new situation. So so of course, what you said is, if you find yourself on a backgammon board, play backgammon if you want to win at this. I hate saying win, but I'm trying to extend the rules metaphor and the game metaphor.
Yeah. There's also the zero-sum game. Like just because you win doesn't mean somebody else loses. Mm-hmm. You don't have to look at it that way. Yeah,
that's the thing. Backgammon's like a zero-sum game. So all the ones we mentioned are zero-sum games, but this doesn't have to be like that. It's whatever winning is for you, like whether it's profit margin or revenue or status or whatever it is. That's your winning. So if you were playing checkers and you're doing great in terms of whatever your success metrics are, and then all of a sudden, like, you're playing checkers as good as you ever have, maybe better, but you're just not getting the results. You're losing, and it's like, it's so frustrating.
What just struck me is, I feel like when somebody criticizes somebody else who's quote unquote famous in their space, mm-hmm. right? The kind of criticism that goes, oh yeah, well, they're doing that, but they also do this, and whatever this is like a bad thing to the person who's making that comment, is maybe one way to tell whether the rules have changed is if you're feeling that way about people who are super successful in the space.
Oh yeah,
like it sounds like envy, but it's more about that. In that situation, that the person making the observation has made a choice that the uber successful person has not, or vice versa. And that's when it's interesting to explore and see if there's something you can play with in there.
Right. Or a little bit like the fouls thing. Like, how dare that person be so aggressive on the court? And it's like, I'm playing by rules that you've chosen not to play by for other reasons. Yeah. So it gets into that touches on an interesting thing. I'm not sure. I'm hesitating because I'm not sure if it's really related to but about a lot of specialization, for example, and niching down on a particular market is putting rules on yourself. But I don't think that's relevant in this conversation today. I think the thing about the conversation today. Well, let me tell an anecdote. So, got a fellow in Dutcherville who shall remain anonymous, but his business had been going really well the last couple of years, selling digital education type products. And for some reason, for whatever reason, this year he's been really struggling to hit his numbers, doesn't know what it is, didn't know what it was, but something changed. And it was a bummer, stressful situation. But he's got a particular set of skills, and some other folks in the room have similar skills as well. And they're selling like subscription services, which is not something this person had sold before. So he was like, well, let me shake things up a little bit and try something different. It's nothing like the packages he has been selling, but it's the exact same expertise. And he just packaged it in this different way that was very successful for these other people. And sure enough, he immediately got a customer within a week. And it's a high ticket sale, so it's great news. But what I'm getting at is like something changed, some rules changed, like something in the market changed. He wasn't doing anything differently, but something changed, and like he's playing checkers better than ever, but the board was different somehow. And so it wasn't a pivot at all. It was more of he didn't do a pivot. He just shook up his offerings and said, well, some other folks that are slightly different disciplines are packaging up that kind of, typing semicolons expertise in this way that's attractive to the seller and to the buyer. And sure enough, one day he's having a hard time selling a $49 ebook. The next day he's selling like an almost $10,000 a month subscription. Right? So
yeah.
I don't think I'm giving anything away, but.
No, but what I love about that situation is that this guy was brave enough to experiment, right? Because it would be easy to say, oh, yeah, I can't sell a $50 ebook, so I guess I can't sell anything.
Yeah,
Instead,
that's how you
he
feel.
goes, yeah, I'm looking at these people. They're selling this expensive thing. I might as well try it. Mm-hmm. What do I have to lose? And boom. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I liked his mindset and his willingness to experiment, because it would be really easy to be an Eeyore when, you have that kind of experience. It's hard to just turn it around and take a big leap like that.
It's a real blow to your confidence when all this, the reoccurring revenue that you're used to getting every month just goes down, down, down. And like, geez, what am I doing wrong? I'm doing everything the same. I don't think I changed anything.
And then that human instinct a lot of time is, I guess I better slash my prices.
Yes.
It's got to be about the price. It has to be about the price, because everybody knows that this is a great thing. It must just be they don't have enough money to spend on this right now, which is like a race to the bottom. Yeah.
And so this person did exactly what I would recommend someone does. If you're feeling the urge to cut prices on something, you can do that. I mean, obviously you can do it. It's not necessarily, sometimes I even recommend it. If you're experimenting with a new productized service and you have raised the price every time you sold it, you double it, or whatever, increase it by 60% every single time you sell it. And then you get to a point where all of a sudden the demand completely falls off a cliff. Then, okay, go back down a notch. But if you've been selling something at a price and you make any kind of significant cut to it just because you're acting out of a place of fear, I'm not talking about lowering something into a charm price from like $1,000 to $999. I'm talking about like $1,000 to $500. Cutting it in half. And it probably what I would recommend in a situation like that is to introduce something new, exactly like this person did. And it's not even this is the most expensive thing he sells now. Right. So it's like, it's not even that you need to introduce something at a lower price point. Let's say you sell something for $25,000 and it's been selling. And last year it was selling fine. This year it hasn't sold at all, and it's November. I would really not want that person to cut the price to, $12,000. Sell the same thing for $12,000. I would much rather see them come up with something brand new for $12,000.
Yeah.
Or for $50,000 or for $1,500. Just find a place in your product ladder that has a gap and put something in it and bring that offer to the market and play with that. I get that it's so much easier to just go to your sales page and edit it and cut the price in half. Yeah, that's very easy.
Yeah.
But it's like, I think it's Seth Godin that says, cutting prices is the last refuge of the bad marketer. It sends all the wrong signals. It probably won't work anyway. It's just not great. Like, can you do it? Yes. Is it an emergency? Okay, do it. But you could say like, well, let me think back. What have people maybe been asking for? Or when they say no to this, how do they say no? what are the objections to spending this? Is it a cash flow thing? Is it a risk thing? Could I combat those? Could I reverse those objections by creating a different, more tailored offer? Could I offer some kind of a guarantee? There's all these different things you could play with to get the sale, but it's like, but what is the new way that you could package your expertise up, bring this new thing to the market, and not have to slash your prices or think about getting a job or just throwing in the towel,
Right.
getting demoralized.
Well, and I think there's another thing that you can do too, which is you can take the price off of your website for a thing.
Yep.
And then, you can have a value pricing conversation. So maybe sometimes you sell it for 15,000 and sometimes you sell it for 30.
Great point.
I like that because it gives you some flexibility. And especially if your audience are big corporates, they're used to that kind of conversation. So, it doesn't bother them not to see a price on the website.
Right. Yeah, it's true. It makes the sale a little bit more complicated, but it gives you more wiggle room to make the deal happen or find out or make something custom.
Yeah.
Even when I sold back in the day when I was doing mobile strategy and I was selling monthly retainers, it was a productized service, but the investment, the fee was high enough that I think without exception, clients wanted to talk to me and customize it, which is sort of taboo for productized services. But they were so, I'd only ever have 2 or 3. It wasn't all things considered, it wasn't really a great productized service because I couldn't scale past like 3 clients at a maximum. So I always ended up with like 2 whales. But it was great money at the time. We're on Easy Street, basically. No kids yet.
Changes everything.
Yeah, no kids, 2 incomes. And so point being, even though that was a productized service, it gave me the wiggle room, to like have a conversation with the buyer and say like, well, how much travel is really going to be involved? Or, or is it going to be, okay, no travel involved, or just domestic, or sometimes they would want like, some kind of recurring meeting. There would be like little things that they might want, maybe fly to the headquarters for a kickoff, but other than that, it'll be remote. So I would be open to basically negotiation.
Yeah.
And
flex up, flex down.
Right. And give them options, even though it was published, even though the price was on the site. So that's a great point, is to just take the prices off and see if, and just get more feedback, have more conversations with people before presenting them with the price, and then customize it based on the perceived value in the particular customer.
Well, because, one of the things that's great about productized services is that the selling is so simple.
Right.
You want one of those? Okay, sold. And so you don't tend to have these kinds of value conversations. You don't tend to really dig into why they want this, what they want to change. Sometimes it depends on the service. But when you take that price off and you force yourself to have that value conversation, you will start to learn how your productized service is actually positioned in the minds of your ideal clients, how they see it, like what's the value in this? What does it do for them? And that gives you incredible data on pricing if you want to go back to making it a flat price. And whether it's the data on how to price it or it's exactly who you target it to. Maybe you're casting your net a little bit too wide and you want to add 1 or 2 client qualifiers to get this thing at a particular price. It's just a great way to get data.
Right. Yeah. Because the downside of the productized service lack of sales call is that you're just getting no feedback to why people aren't buying.
Yeah. It's just like this black hole.
Yeah. There's just no feedback. They just don't buy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I love about that? That is just as easy as slashing your prices, but it's not slashing your prices. So you just take the prices off and put, like, let's talk about your project or whatever your call to action is. Let's jump on a call and see if we're a good fit. And yeah, just switch into conversation mode, into sales interview mode.
Well, I think it also takes a sort of pressure off of us. Not pressure is that right word. It's we start to think about, oh yeah, if I'm going to do that thing, that's $50,000. I'm not going to do it for less than 50,000. Like we have this like price in our head. And if we start to really, when we start to really connect that with the value that we're delivering, all of a sudden you can say, oh, so I could see where I could provide something that's like this for $25,000, but I'm working less and delivering this level of value. Or, 50 is really underpriced. If I focus on this segment of my potential clients, then it's really more like 75 or 100. It's until you get that, it's really important to decouple what we see as our worth. God, I hate that word. It's
Yes.
so loaded with judgment.
I know.
But yeah, how we see our worth versus the value that we're delivering, the transformation that we're delivering to our clients.
Yeah, I love that. Right. It's like take a, well, I actually did this recently. I was like, there's a big, huge, enormous jump between the two top most expensive things you could buy for me. Like one was $2,500 and one is $25,000. And I'm like, there's got to be something I could do for people in between, like people who want something in between. So I took my $25,000 thing and I took out the costliest piece to me, which I think is valuable, definitely to the buyer. But if I take it out, which would be like, if I take out the recurring biweekly meetings from my private coaching, if I take that out and it's all asynchronous, my costs go way down in terms of my time investment or my calendar getting blocked out. And so I can charge like less than half. Like, I think I'm selling it for $4,500 or for 6 months. So it's in between, or $7,500 for a year, right? So, but it's not as valuable. It's definitely not going to be as valuable to people as being able to talk to me on the phone for an hour every other week. Like that accountability call is very important, but it's also very expensive.
Right.
So if you take that out and there's a certain type of person who doesn't need an accountability call, let's say, and they're like, oh, well, here's a version. It's the same thing without the calls.
Yeah.
And I can, so maybe if you're listening to this and you've had like a particular offering that you've had for a long time, and like Michelle said, like, oh, maybe one of the things you're thinking is cutting the price. What if you, just like you said, take out something that's very costly to you that would allow you to still feel like it was worth you're getting paid what you're worth, air quotes.
Yeah.
But call it a new thing. It's like a new thing. It's like a new rung in between two rungs on your product ladder, let's say. Like look for where there's a hole and you could perhaps fill it by modifying something and calling it something else.
Yeah, I do. I prefer that. And I like the sort of psychological value to you of you, the person making this change in that, because it's not you focused.
Right.
It's not, I'm not good enough to do this. Everybody else is doing that and I'm not, it gets you away from that and just focuses on what we're supposed to be focused on. How can we deliver value to our ideal clients and buyers in a way that allows us to work, as much time as humanly possible in our genius zone?
Right. Yeah. And so if people aren't buying the old thing, I mean, whatever changed, they're just not seeing the value. I mean, bottom line.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, you got to shake things up. I feel like one of the things, I don't think it's just me. I think a lot of people, at least in Ditcherville, I don't think people are innovating as much as they could in general for these kinds of businesses. It's like you come up with something, it starts to work. It's easy to be like, oh, this is working great. This worked, or it doesn't work. And then you just try something else. And then when something does work or a few things start to work, it can get really easy to be like, cool, this will never change.
Oh, it's so tempting, right? It's like, oh, okay, we'll just rake in the money from this thing and sit back and relax and, have fun.
Until if and when I decide I'm sick of doing this particular thing and I'll maybe try something else. But it is, especially let's say you create a couple of products and services, maybe 3 or 4 or whatever, that are working. And And you're still working on the business. You're doing marketing, you're doing podcasts, you're writing a mailing list, you're on YouTube, you're doing all of these, you're doing stuff like you're working on the business. That's not really innovate. I wouldn't really, some of it is, I mean, sometimes you can get a new idea through your writing and that could create an idea for a new course or something, but it's like, that's like a side effect. I feel like there should be a little bit more, I certainly myself, I could put a little bit more regularity into creating new workshops or writing new things or new videos or whatever, and do more innovation, more experimentation, have more failures, because the more failures you have, the more wins you're going to have. And perhaps it's these times when you kind of like the world punches you in the stomach and says like, people just aren't seeing the value right now. Then, okay, let me innovate. Let me create something that's a hybrid of two other things, or let me package my expertise in a dramatically different way at a dramatically different price. You know, it's like, it's probably something that, sort of talking to myself at this point, it's probably something I could do more. And I think most of the people in Ditcherville don't innovate that much.
It's interesting because when we sell expertise, the word innovate or innovation doesn't come up that often. Like, think about it. It's something you hear when you're making a thing, or you're making technology, or you're making a product. Yeah. But yeah, it doesn't mean it doesn't apply to our kinds of businesses. And I think that certainly when circumstances change, the mother of invention, it's time to innovate. But yeah, I agree with you. And I feel the same way about, I usually have at least one experiment a year. Could I do two? Yeah, maybe. Mm-hmm. I think it's an interesting thing to think about. And a lot of people are doing their planning now. So it's a good question to add to the mix. Well, I always say one of the questions you should always ask yourself when you're planning is, what do I want to be different next year? And, it's easy to focus on the little stuff, but I think innovation says, maybe there's something bigger that I could think about. And it doesn't mean you have to put all your marbles on it, but, starting the experimentation process like your Ditcherville member can prove really profitable.
Right. Do we want to go? That might make a good follow-up show, like examples of innovations that we've seen from people we know in the kind of authority-based business space, especially soloists. Because I can think of a few novel things that aren't obvious. That, for example, like putting a bunch of time into creating some kind of a research report, periodic benchmarking your clients. We could probably make a list of 10 things that are not obvious things that someone could experiment with. Masterminds is another one. Membership communities. Those are maybe a little bit more obvious. Anyway, if that sounds interesting, you can email us.
Because we're always looking for a new idea for a show.
Yeah. What is this, episode 306?
Yeah. We need the ideas.
Yes, ideas are always good. What else do we have to say about this? From the rules, if we're thinking about rules.
Well, I think, what would be sort of interesting, I'm actually thinking I'm going to do this myself after we talk. I like this idea, what would be interesting is to kind of jot down, like, what do you think the rules are for you? And, some of this relates to like money mindset. People think, oh, I can't, if I make more than $100,000 a year, I'm a bad person, right? Money is going to tempt me. And that kind of stuff. But if you really think about like, what do I think are the rules of the game? And especially the rules that start with, I can't, fill in the blank. And I guarantee everybody's got some. And if you think about it for a little while, it might be interesting to have sort of the rules that you think apply. And when I say you think, I'm also talking about your values. So it's not just what you think, it's what you live. There's some things that you probably don't want to do. Like, so you might say, I'm not working 70 hours a week to do this thing. And all that's perfectly valid. But I would write those down and then look at the challenges on the business side, like what things are not moving, what used to be successful and now isn't. Right? What are people telling you If you're not having those kinds of conversations, then you will if you take the price off your website. What are they telling you about the benefit that they're going to get, the transformation? How do they value that in their own business or life?
Yeah, that's a very interesting exercise to go through. I'm like just sort of like trying to do it in my head.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, what are the, because we, I mean, I think both of us are not super duper rule followers. I mean, we're certainly on a non-traditional path in life, right?
Yeah.
So perhaps maybe rules isn't the right, to a certain extent. I almost want to say we're maybe have a higher risk tolerance than other people, but I really don't think it's that, because I see this path as the safer one. But anyway, if you imagine that we're not super duper rule followers, before the show, we were like, we probably follow a million rules that we don't even know about. So the idea of surfacing that on a piece of paper is pretty interesting, because then you can look at it and say, well, what are the rules that so I sort of like the idea of writing down the rules that you think you're following, or the ones that you're aware of that you're following, and maybe trying to dig up some ones that, like you said, mindset things that maybe you're following, and then look at them and be like, why am I doing this? Like, should this have an expiration date on it? Should this way of being have expired years ago? Am I just following this for no obvious reason? Because I'll bet you they're in there. I'll bet you there's got to be.
And you can also identify, your values in there. Like, I think it's really hard for me to criticize on a public platform somebody. Like, it's really hard for me to do that. And it's not that I don't have the thoughts. I absolutely do. I could sit here and give you the 5 things, right? But there's a part of me that likes to be upbeat and uplifting. And so...
Yeah, don't have something good to say.
Yeah, but then what does that mean for a business? Well, it means that I'm not going to take on a big kahuna in the space who I think is going off in a weird direction.
Right.
Like, oh, well, maybe I should. So and again, I use that word should. I shouldn't have used should. But that's what's helpful about it when you look at those things and you can say, oh, I want to keep this. I like the fact that I do this way. It's really important to me. It's part of who I am. Great. Right. But there's probably some stuff in there that you could change without really thinking about it too much.
Yeah, exactly. It's very hard for me to even focus on the conversation because now I'm trying to make the
You're
list.
You're doing the exercise.
I'm trying not to do the exercise, but my brain wants to. So maybe the listener is feeling the same way.
Maybe we need to stop so that they can do this too. But I do have to add one other thing, because the basketball thing was really bugging me, so I looked it up. So It is 5 in high school and college, and it's 6 fouls in the NBA.
6? Jeez.
Yeah. I know. I didn't think. I kept thinking that it's 4. I said 5, but I'm like, isn't it 4? Like, isn't it high school and college at 4? And so I looked it up. It's 5 and 6.
Well, apologies to the basketball fans in the audience who have been screaming.
I know.
At their
how dumb could we be, right?
Yeah. In case you were wondering if I was just kidding about the fact that I'm not into sports ball. Cool. All right. So maybe that's enough to.
We're going to go make our rules list now.
We're going to go make our rules list. Exactly. Cool. All right, folks. Well, that's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark.
And I'm Rochelle Moulton.
And we hope you join us again next time for The Business of Authority. Bye.
Bye-bye.